We can't change what others think, but what we can do is provide irrefutable evidence that they're wrong. The more our young people do, the more they defy those expectations, then the greater the expectations for them will become. G'day, I'm Debra Caldow, and welcome to the Red Giraffe Solutions Expanding Worlds podcast, where we aim to support you as you help your young person with additional needs plan for their future. A future where they are safe, secure, and live a rewarding and fulfilling life. From around the world, I share stories and share solutions from people making this possible right now. I'm a parent of a young person with additional needs, so I understand the challenges. Many of the people I've interviewed on this podcast have already helped me design a better future for my daughter, and I hope that they might help you as well to imagine what's possible for your young person. One of the biggest things I've learned over the years of supporting my daughter is to never expect too much of others, and to never expect too little of her. And certainly when she was younger, there were plenty of people telling me not to expect too much. At that time, I'd never heard the saying, the soft bigotry of low expectations, but it was very obviously ever present in her early years. Of course, over time, we all get wise to anyone telling us they know our child better than we do, and we start to push back. But that's never easy, because that threatens others and often makes them push harder for us to believe their version of the future. And there are still times today when something will happen to illustrate that saying, but the difference now is that she is in that place in her life where she has her own expectations, and they don't depend on what others expect of her. But the journey to this place has been long and sometimes quite difficult. So I wanted to share in this episode not only what I've learned, but also what I wish I'd thought about more deeply when it comes to expectations. And the first thing is really about us, not our children. When our children are young, it's our expectations of them that guide them and that sustain them. We've all looked to our parents and our families for our values, for our attitudes. So the role that we play in our children's future is incredibly important. Looking back, I know I had great expectations for my daughter and always believed she could live independently one day and would have a job. But I was far from perfect in terms of always making sure that she knew that. But having said that, there were many things we did to make sure she had that self-belief, to try things and to believe in her own awesomeness. One of those things was to expose her to motivational speakers. We were lucky, or maybe some other people might say unlucky, enough to have to spend a lot of time driving her to school. So on every journey, we listened to an audiobook. Of course, initially she was far from keen, but we persevered, and over time we found a compromise, so that part of the journey was always spent listening to an audiobook. This habit still exists today, as she listens to one particular speaker every morning as she eats breakfast before she goes to work. It's one of her unbreakable habits. Now, you may not necessarily agree with her speaker choice, which happens to be a guy called Zig Ziglar, but what this has done for her has given her another voice in her head, if you like. A voice that reminds her of important lessons. One of her, and my favourite sayings of his is, failure is an event, not a person. And that is one thing that we come back to over and over again, especially if she's had an issue at work. It's so simple, but also so powerful for her. It enables her to realise that whatever happened today does not have to affect tomorrow. Of course, it's not always as simple as that, but it always gives her a better place to go to than to spend the evening worrying about what will happen the next day. And yes, I know motivational speakers aren't for everyone. But if you find the right one, as we did, then it's a positive voice that I feel young people like my daughter need to hear much more often. It has for her formed part of her defence against those negative voices that she'll probably always have around her in some form or another. So great expectations start with us and transfer over time to our children. However, the role we play is in not only making sure they believe in themselves, but giving them the space to expect more of themselves as well. Because the real change will come when they believe in themselves. And for my daughter, that's often come through very small things. We can underestimate how much input we need to give our children. We can also underestimate the importance that they can place on something as simple as being able to make their own lunch. This expectation that she can do more for herself has led her to trying to do more for herself. Of course, it's not always worked out as intended, and as I've said before, I'd rather she makes mistakes now when I'm around to help her to pick up the pieces and to try again. So if there's expectations that we have for our children and the expectations that they have for themselves, then the third part, of course, is the expectations that wider society often have for our children. Now that is clearly a conversation in itself, but when it comes to exactly what we can do about that, the answer is absolutely nothing. We can't change what others think, but what we can do is provide irrefutable evidence that they're wrong. And that's the power that we must harness as we support our young people. The more our young people do, the more they defy those expectations, then the greater the expectations for them will become. So I have great expectations for my daughter. I know she'll be okay when I'm gone, but much more important than all of that, she has great expectations of herself. And that is something that makes me so very proud and very, very happy. I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that the stories and the solutions shared on here help you as you support your young person to create their future. And if you know anyone who would find the ideas useful, please share the podcast with them. Of course, if you want to, you can leave a review, because that is another way families who need this information can find it more easily. This show is created as part of Red Giraffe Solutions. To find out what the Red Giraffe is all about, visit redgiraffesolutions.com, where you'll find more resources around daily living, relationships, purpose and financial security. I'm at Debra Caldow on Instagram and Facebook. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to have a conversation with you on any of those. Bye for now.